In this video, I'll be covering Learning Objective 3.4 for Chapter 3 for PSY 235, Social Psychology. In this part of the chapter, you'll be learning about why do we tend to avoid using high-effort controlled thinking, and what are some ways that we can encourage people to use it more. High-effort or controlled thinking, sometimes called controlled processing, involves consciously, intentionally, voluntarily choosing to think hard about making a judgment. So in thinking about other people, we make these flash judgments about whether a person is nice or not nice. And we do it all the time. We often give it very little attention. What if you're asked to have an interaction with another person, and then you're going to be asked a bunch of questions about who they are? You may shift over into high-effort, controlled thinking in order to intentionally extract information from that person so that you can create an accurate profile of who they are. On a regular basis, that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of cognitive energy. It tends to lead to more accurate presentations or accurate judgments of who other people are when we engage in it, though. Conscious thought and behavior is something that we often associate with free will. So, especially in an American or Western context, we tend to have a high valuation on freedom of will. Like, I am choosing to think the way I think and to do what I do of my own free will. In actuality, you're probably a lot less free than you think you are, or you would prefer to think you are. There are a lot of factors that are going on in our environments and going on inside of us that can influence what we do and what kind of thoughts we have and the thoughts that we perceive consciously. What this may do is to encourage us to overestimate or underestimate how much control we have over the environment that's around us. The solution is to engage in more controlled thinking. So thinking about this a little bit more, the connection between controlled thinking and free will, do we really have all the control over our actions that we think we do? We can freely choose things at various points in time, but how much control do we really have? Now, ultimately, that's a question for philosophers, but it really matters in this context of understanding social cognition. We don't have as much freedom in terms of controlling what we think as we think we do. Our thoughts are often highly, highly automatic and contingent on the schemas that are available to us at any given time. So while we think our thinking is very controlled, it's often less controlled than we imagine. Much of our behavior is really driven by automatic processing, and we have often limited awareness that we're actually doing that. We walk through our days on autopilot a good portion of the time. And not that we're doing it intentionally. We're doing it because it's practical, because it's efficient, because it's easy. And we rarely get a lot of feedback when we screw up. So think about driving. You're driving on Route 62 or whatever, and somebody cuts you off. And your automatic thought, at least if you're me, is that person is an idiot for doing that, and they meant to do it. Maybe they meant to do it. Maybe they're just not an idiot. Maybe they're a mean idiot, and they're doing it on purpose to be a jerk. And I may make a whole host of other assumptions, and I'm never going to get to meet this person unless they actually crash into me, at which time I will probably yell at them a lot and probably swear a lot based on my schematic assumption of who and what they are. All of that is automatic processing. It has nothing to do with really interrogating what was going on with that person. People sometimes do believe that they are consciously controlling their thinking, and they overestimate the degree to which they're actually doing so. Missing things that are actually influencing them, like priming events, accessibility, and so on. It can also work the other way. People can be controlling things more than they realize they are. The example that you're given in your textbook is this phenomenon that, I mean, it's still out there, but it's widely been debunked, where it was this thing called facilitated communication, where it was argued that a caregiver or a loved one, usually it was someone close to a person who was nonverbal, could provide the energy by moving a letterboard around under the nonverbal person's hand, and therefore helping them to spell out their thoughts. But what was determined in actual empirical research on this was that it was really the thoughts of the caregiver that were coming through on the facilitated communication board, and not the thoughts of the other person. So, and the way they tested it was they would have people who believed that they could do facilitated communication would work with another person who has private thoughts, and they would not express them. And the facilitated communicator was, using the board and attempting to pull those thoughts out. And what they found was that what was produced by the facilitated communicator was no more likely to be accurate than inaccurate. But the facilitated communicator still believed that what they were doing was faithfully recounting the thoughts of the other person. What this means is there's often a disconnect between our conscious assessment of how much control we have over our own thoughts and behaviors, and we're often flawed in how we determine what causes our actions and thoughts in the first place. For example, we are often, blissfully unaware of the degree to which advertising actually determines what we purchase. I've mentioned TikTok a few times in my videos. I am absolutely fascinated by the way advertising works in TikTok, because it kind of triggers for me this chapter. It shows how they are trying to drive the accessibility of certain kinds of information. Like, TikTok knows that I am female identifying. It also knows that I'm in my 50s. It has a lot of smart AI hanging in there. So the algorithm is going to feed me lots of things that it assumes are relevant to my life. Like, I get fed a lot of ads for underwear, beauty things like makeup and hair, especially styling tools. They must think I really, really need to do a better job with my hair. But they also feed me a lot of gardening tips, especially weed removal. So they must assume I'm a white woman in my 50s. I obviously have a garden. Okay. When I think, normally when we see these ads, oh, that looks really interesting. Who's controlling who there? They're throwing this product out in front of me. Like, I just purchased off the TikTok shop a lawn sweeper that picks up leaves and puts them in this little bin. And it's not like I need it. I mean, I have 2 rakes and I have a lawnmower. Do I really need a leaf picker-upper? No. The algorithm started feeding me so many ads for the same product that over time it just became chronically accessible in my brain. And I made a decision to buy it. And then when my daughter said, "Why'd you buy that?" I said, because it's going to be so much faster for picking up the leaves. So essentially, that's not the reason. The reason I bought it is because my timeline was flooded with lawn sweeper ads. So we often don't know how much impact outside factors, outside forces really have on us. Another tricky problem that we experience in this area is something called counterfactual thinking. And I experience this all the time. What if thinking? What if this had happened instead of that? Last year, I was driving to my volunteer gig, and I drive a pickup truck. I'm driving along, and I didn't notice somebody had left their trash can halfway into the street. I just didn't see it. I clipped the trash can with my side mirror, my passenger side mirror, and smashed it up, damaged my car. For days and days, I was like, what if I had just been paying more attention? What if I had just been paying more attention? I never would have hit the damn trash can, and I wouldn't have had to spend all this money dealing with my insurance company, dealing with the repairs to my truck. I wouldn't have had to pay for the trash can if I had just been paying more attention. That kind of thing. Counterfactual thoughts can have a real strong impact on your emotions. Now, counterfactual thoughts could happen, when we touch on positive things too. Like maybe you're an athlete and you had a super great day, an amazing performance, and you look back on it. What if I had made these mistakes? Wow, I'm really glad I didn't, and you could feel grateful. On the other hand, what if you were that pitcher who was 1 out away from a perfect game, where no hits, no runs, no walks, 1 out away, and then you throw a fastball that doesn't fool anyone and out of the park homer? You're going to spend some time, if you're that pitcher, thinking, if I had just thrown the sinker, I would have had a perfect game. That kind of counterfactual thinking can make you feel worse and worse with time. And this can connect to the easier it is to mentally undo something that's an outcome you didn't want to have happen, the stronger our emotions are. Same goes with it, even if it's a good outcome. You had a really fantastic performance or whatever, and you look back and think just how easily it could have gone the other way. That produces stronger emotions, more joy, more gratitude for the positive outcome, more sadness, more unpleasant emotions for the negative outcome. If there are positive consequences, what can happen is that going into that counterfactual reasoning, if you can see just how easily the positive outcome could have been derailed, that can motivate you to do even better in the future. If you have negative consequences, though, it can lead to what's called rumination, where you're over-focusing on the same negative thought. If I had just done this, if I had just done this, if I had just paid attention to that side of the road, I would not have hit the trash can, and all these bad things would not have happened. That has actually been found to be associated with depression, with symptoms of depression. When people ruminate more on negative consequences, it can really harm your emotional state. So what are some things we can do to improve human thinking? We can inform people that their judgment abilities, their ability to make judgments in social contexts and their judgments of risk are so frequently flawed, and that can help them to make better judgments. One example is something called the planning fallacy, and I talk about this to students all the time when they're expressing to me, they think they can get a task, like an assignment, done in an afternoon. And I point out to them, like, let's say it's a lit review, and they think, I'm just going to do the whole literature review that includes 10 research articles. I'm going to do that Sunday afternoon when it's due on Monday. And I ask them, how long do you think it's going to take you to read each article? And they're like, it's just an article. It'll take me 20 minutes. When in actuality, it's likely to take more like 90 minutes to really read closely a research article, and then you still have to do your writing about what you read. So that's going to take probably about a couple of hours per article. So students often will be too optimistic about how fast they can work on a task. In my experience as a parent, kids are notorious for planning fallacy. So if you say, I need you to clean your room, they may estimate that it'll take them 10 minutes, when in fact it's going to take them a couple of hours to do what needs to be done. So overcoming the planning fallacy means breaking down tasks into parts and then really doing some hard thinking, using controlled thinking about how long each part is going to take. And that can help you to avoid the planning fallacy. So reminding people how long it took the last time they did a particular task can help them to avoid the planning fallacy. And, the planning fallacy is one of the reasons that people get bit by procrastination, is because they think a task is going to take less time than it actually does. Another way that we can get people to use more rigorous, controlled thinking is to teach them basic statistics. There's a lot of negative emotions that a lot of people attach to statistics and research methods. But if you learn about statistical interpretation, like interpreting frequencies, interpreting percentages, interpreting estimation and probability, you tend to make better decisions, especially if you can call upon that basic information and then look at it rationally. Using that controlled processing, it can make you more likely to use accurate information as you're interpreting other people, other situations, making risk judgments, and so on. And that concludes my coverage of Chapter 3.